The button has been pressed. Hello happy people, I'm Kat and welcome to Copycat Vlogs. My channel is about lifestyle, sports, entertainment, human rights and anything interesting, so welcome. I'm recording this video in August when it's a high time for people to go and see their families, to go for family vacations. I'm no exception. A week ago I was in Turkey in the region called Alanya with my family, spending my vacations, and that gave me an idea to record this particular vlog. I haven't seen my family since November of last year. Anyone who is new to this vlog, I'm working as a journalist. I live in Madrid, Spain, and my family is back in Russia. So unfortunately, we don't get to see each other very often, especially with COVID and now with the whole situation that's happening in the world. So seeing them is something very special and important for me. Nevertheless, it's not very easy either. So this vlog is going to be about challenges that arise when you meet your family, and I'm going to give you a few tips, at least that I have discovered for myself, on how to manage difficult situations. And the next vlog is going to be about vacations themselves. So this is the video that I wish somebody could give me in my hardest moments of dealing with family members, and the advice that I wish I received. If you find this video useful, please comment, like, subscribe to my channel, always welcome. This really pushes the video and it makes me think that I'm doing something which has meaning, which is always a great feeling. The world nowadays is becoming more complex and people are speaking out about difficult issues. Before, even in 2000s, like at least me, I had a feeling that we live in this perfect, unicorn times where everyone has a happy family. And even now, I think the problem is that if you go to Instagram, you check some videos or photos and you think, oh my God, like this person has it all. But when you meet someone in real life, have honest conversations, we end up finding out that nothing is ever perfect. It's about your personal response to situations and how you're dealing with things. And I think everyone has a story which we know nothing about. So I like this phrase about being kind, because someone is going through something and you might have zero idea. Family vacation always consists of different generations. In my case, it was me, my parents, and then my grandparents. So having three different generations can be very difficult, and not everything can always go smooth. In my case, my mom booked accommodation and she told me it's all fine, and I'm now, being an adult, when I'm traveling, I'm in charge of such things. But I trusted her, and when I arrived to the place, it was way smaller than expected. I'm used to living independently. I like to have my own space. I like to have enough space. I like to have a quiet time. All of this really frustrated me in the beginning, just because it wasn't the deal. Like, Mom, you promised me, like it was a different deal. But I think when we grow up, we realize that our parents are just people. They're not gods that we used to imagine them to be. And that's a very important kind of tip number one, to just understand that even though you might have certain expectations for them, they're just people. And when you were a kid, they helped you to deal with life, go through things, but now it's sometimes I feel like they're the kids and you are the adult, and sometimes you have to give them some help and give them some advice, not to confuse it, with codependency and with parents completely depending on their kids. That's another story. I'm talking about healthy relationship where, of course, sometimes, maybe you know how technologies work in a better way, so you can explain it to them. Even if there is like a hiccup, in my case, it was a big hiccup, I just said, okay, I'm just going to look for apartment nearby, because it's more important for me to have my own space rather than stay in this uncomfortable situation, be stressed, be unhappy, and then bring it on to my family. I don't think it's fair. Tip number two, I think nowadays we live in the era where we learn fashionable words, as my mom calls them, and one of them is boundaries. And I'm really grateful for therapy, for mental means accessible right now. So even by watching YouTube videos, you can learn a lot of things, and not necessarily you get them immediately. Something like boundary. As a kid, your boundaries were not respected. And if, as a kid, you can be vocal about your boundaries because you don't really know what's right and what's wrong for you. Your parents know that. But when as a kid your boundaries are messy, when you grow up to be an adult, it gets even harder because then you don't know what's right, what's wrong, so you can maybe feel inadequate at the times and feel bad about how you're acting because you would feel guilty for, getting angry. I really like this tip that remember that you are who you are now, you're not the younger version of yourself, because your parents, people in general, they're used to your version of how you were as a kid. For them, you're eternal kid, that will never change. But you have changed, you have transformed. I don't believe in core change of personality, maybe on some rare occasions, but I do believe that people transform. If we didn't, it would be boring to live. We would be always stagnating at the same place. And sometimes it's really hard to explain yourself to your family. I'll give you an example. Traveling, meeting people allowed me to learn more about different minorities, and I'm very vocal and supportive of women's rights, of LGBTQI rights, of people with disabilities, stuff like that. And for my family, maybe it's not their main field of interest, which is fine. But then, of course, sometimes I can be easily triggered when we have certain conversation and when I'm saying, I don't know, I'm a feminist, and my family like, where does that come from? Who gave you that idea? So it feels like they're kind of not really understanding where I come from. And when we don't see each other for a long time, of course, I get access to my information, they learn their new information. But when we come together, it doesn't always mean, putting one picture together. It's just like a puzzle. You put different parts together and they don't always stick together. So that's what sometimes you can feel with your family. You can feel alienated. You might feel misunderstood. Being a fiery person that I am, I can try to explain myself in a very direct ways. But I think what's important is to remember that you are not the version of yourself from the past. Your family might find that strange, but then they also have to accept you and your boundaries. Sometimes you have to be vocal about your boundaries. It's not just enough to get fiery and to be surprised why your family doesn't get you. I think it's important to remember that sometimes it's a generational gap, and yeah, you are close in some ways, but some conversations can be hard. But standing up for yourself and claiming who you are is important. Another tip in any difficult situation is, it might sound banal to some, but just being kind and being empathetic, because I do think that anger doesn't just come from nowhere. If somebody is mistreating you or being harsh or doesn't respect your boundaries, it doesn't come from a happy place. It is not easy to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It is hard, especially if you're being triggered, if your feelings are being hurt. But just remind yourself that everyone is struggling with something. For example, my grandmother, she had a harsh childhood. She went through many things, and sometimes, this comes up in certain situations. I still love her, and when I remind myself about that not easy journey of this very strong, very beautiful, very powerful woman, I do understand that I haven't struggled with something like that in that same way. So it's hard for me to imagine how I would have dealt with situations. I do believe there are different situations. There are toxic relatives who completely don't, respect you, and it's hard to find place for empathy in your heart. Sometimes just having some sort of understanding or acceptance of the person allows the person to also be themselves, and somehow this magical transformation happens when you just let them be and when you don't judge them constantly in your head. I think that helps a lot. We recently had a conversation with one of my friends, and it was in general about, conflict situations when they arise, how do you deal with people? And she's fiery like me, so I'm usually like emotions, and that's something I'm working on how to contain my emotions, how to be an adult, how to breathe first, and then say what I think. A friend told me what helps her sometimes is really to take a step back, not engage, not engage. I'm gonna repeat that like 10 times in this tip. And then still say what you feel like, but always use this form of I feel, because we tend to blame other people. You did this, you did that. It's easier because you want to find the enemy. You want to find someone who did something to you and you're always right, you're an angel, just the wings are missing, and another person is guilty. But it's not how it works, and we know it. And sometimes winning means stepping back. It's weird, and I'm not saying you should be absolutely passive. Again, it's not the kind of tip I would give, but sometimes just taking your time, processing things, saying stop, walking out, and then coming back to a conversation when you have mental space for that, mental capacity. It's very useful for me. At the initial stage, it might almost feel like you have lost something, but the important thing, you haven't. Sometimes stepping away is about being smarter. It's not about being weaker. I'm always like trying to believe in better version of someone, but sometimes that also means I'm trying to change that person, and understanding that you won't change your parents, you won't change your grandparents. They are who they are, really, this is it. You might create versions of your parents in your own head. You might become your own parent at some point. And I think that's what growing up sometimes means. When people haven't seen each other for a long time, it's very easy to get sucked into that drama, to get emotional, to try to explain your point. But at the same time, it's always important to ask yourself, what's the outcome of this fight? And if there is no outcome, if it's just, throwing things around at each other, which ultimately means hurting each other, maybe it's better, just to be a pedestrian, not a passenger in this crazy moving car of drama and conflict. And yeah, that's another tip, just be pedestrian, not the passenger. These were my tips. I hope you find them useful. I hope that your mental health stays at the best place where it can be before, during and after your vacations with family. I guarantee you it's not easy for anyone, and I think every family has its skeletons in the closet, as they say. There are ways to overcome it. There are ways not to get into drama, not to engage, and still stay yourself, still be able to confront your family when needed, because I don't believe that you should avoid your family. It's really important to confront and to speak up when it's needed, but at the same time doing it in loving and caring way, not in attacking and hostile way, is very important. Stay safe. Thanks for watching my channel. Share in comments if you are familiar with the subject, if you know what I'm talking about, and maybe you have some tips of your own. So I would be very curious to know what they are. Maybe you disagree with some of the points that I made. That's also cool. Share underneath this video. Give me a subscribe if you liked it. It would really encourage me to make more of this. All the best. Your copycat.